A reading from the Gospel according to Mark, chapter 11. When they were approaching Jerusalem at Bethphage and Bethany, near the Mount of Olives, Jesus sent 2 of the disciples and said to them, "Go into the village ahead of you, and immediately as you enter it, you will find tied there a colt that has never been ridden. Untie it and bring it. If anyone says to you, 'Why are you doing this?' just say this, 'The Lord needs it and will send it back here immediately.'" They went away and found a colt tied near a door outside in the street. As they were untying it, some of the bystanders said to the disciples, "What are you doing untying the colt?" They told them what Jesus had said, and they allowed them to take it. Then they brought the colt to Jesus and threw their cloaks on it, and he sat on it. Many people spread their cloaks on the road, and others spread leafy branches as they had cut in the fields. Then those who went ahead and those who followed were shouting, "Hosanna! Blessed is the one who comes in the name of the Lord. Blessed is the coming kingdom of our ancestor David. Hosanna in the highest heaven." Then Jesus entered Jerusalem and went into the temple, and having looked around at everything, as it was already late, he went out to Bethany with the 12. The word of God for the people of God.
Thanks be to God.
Palm Sunday, a day of collision, a day of revelation. Jesus is planful about his entrance into Jerusalem, nothing spontaneous about it. The biblical scholar Ched Myers explains that, quote, "Palm Sunday is planned political street theater." Marcus Borg describes it as, quote, "a prearranged counter-procession." In the verses from Mark's Gospel that Lauren just read, we learn that Jesus makes a plan, asks 2 disciples to get a colt from the village, and tells them what to say if they are questioned. Then he and his followers head into the city, knowing full well that Pilate, the governor, and his entourage are coming from the other direction, as they did at the same time every year in preparation for Passover celebrations. Jesus and a band of peasants enter the city from the east. Roman soldiers enter the city from the west. These 2 processions embody the central conflict of the week that leads to Jesus' crucifixion. Who would be hailed? Who would be mocked? Who would the crowd cheer for? Well, the people spread their garments and lay down branches for Jesus. These are gestures of honor, signaling a wholly new kind of royalty. It is a daring thing to do, because Emperor Tiberius was not simply the ruler of Rome, he was also understood to be the Son of God. He had political power, he had theological power. So imagine there's Jesus, who was born in a barn. There's Jesus riding a ratty-looking donkey through Jerusalem. And there's Jesus armed not with a weapon of violence, but with utter confidence, born of love. And then there's the crowd. They're in front of Jesus, they're behind Jesus, heralding his entrance with great energy, waving branches, shouting, "Hosanna!" Well, let us pause and remember what that word means. Hosanna means 2 things at once. It's an expression of adoration, a cheer of approval, a shout of triumph, "Hosanna! Hosanna!" And it is also a plea, meaning, save us, we beseech you. It is a cry for help. It is an appeal for God's saving ways. Hosanna! It is a desperate yearning to be saved, rescued, restored, liberated, set free, set free, set free. Now remember that in the years prior to all of this, prior to this entrance into Jerusalem, through his words and actions, parables and healings, listening and praying, teaching and loving, Jesus has embodied what it means to be set free. Freedom is a big word, especially for those of us who call America our home. The United States is the land of the free and the home of the brave, right? Could it be that the word freedom has been used and perhaps overused to the point that it has lost some of its impact, some of its depth of meaning? How many Americans really get that those famous lyrics from the Star-Spangled Banner are a question, not a declaration? Oh, say, does that Star-Spangled Banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave? Question mark? Is that actually true? And when was it true? When was it not true? Who is it true for? Who isn't it true for? Every time we sing or hear our national anthem, we should hear it as a question. Does that Star-Spangled Banner yet wave o'er the land of the free? I'm reading a book right now by Timothy Snyder. Perhaps some of you know his work. He is an American historian specializing in the history of Central and Eastern Europe, the Soviet Union, and the Holocaust. And his book on tyranny is small and mighty. It was published in 2017. It was on the New York Times nonfiction bestseller list for years. It has sold more than 1.5 million copies. And in it, Snyder lists 20 conditions that allow tyranny to hold and thrive. And if you read it, be prepared to be alarmed at best and terrified at worst on tyranny. The Timothy Snyder book that I'm reading now is called On Freedom. It is much longer. It was published in 2024, and here is part of what Snyder writes in the preface. Americans are told that we were given freedom by our founding fathers, or by our national character, or by our capitalist economy. None of this is true. Freedom cannot be given. If we believe something else makes us free, we never learn what we must do. Freedom cannot be given. If we believe something else makes us free, we never learn what we must do. The central thesis of Snyder's book is this: there are two kinds of freedom, freedom from and freedom to. Freedom from is an absence of barriers, freedom from dictators, freedom from occupation, freedom from oppression, freedom from poverty. Libertarians espouse freedom from government, right? When government is small and weak and out of the way, they say, then we are free. Snyder calls this absence of barriers negative freedom. And negative freedom is how many of us would explain our personal freedom to someone else. When certain realities that hold us back are removed, misogyny, racism, ableism, heterosexism, homophobia, addiction, abuse, when those realities are removed, then we are free. But is the removal of a barrier really enough to liberate us, to make us free, individually or collectively as a country? I think of the war in Iran happening right now, The U.S. has assassinated many of the country's most powerful people. The Iranian leadership has been decapitated. Much of their political infrastructure has been destroyed. But is the removal of the leaders of that regime enough to truly liberate the Iranian people? Another problem with freedom from is that it can do harm in the reverse. So for example, when 19th century white landowners in America were free from any rules about being able to own people as slaves, what kind of perverse freedom was that? And what if there were freedom from government regulation for clean air, clean water, disposal of toxic waste? What kind of freedom would that be? Timothy Snyder argues that if we want to be free, we have to affirm, not just deny. He argues it is more important to add to the common good, not just remove barriers. Yes, he says, sometimes we will have to destroy, but more often we will need to create. And this approach is what Snyder calls freedom to. Freedom too is positive. It has a vision. It is based on values and core convictions. It happens when we build, add on, connect, create moral structures as well as political structures. It's about presence, not absence. The presence of shared values, the presence of moral standards held in common, in community, for the common good. You see, for as important as the law and the court system are, we cannot sue and countersue, appeal and counter-appeal our way as a society to freedom. Not going to happen. We cannot litigate our way to moral standards. We cannot litigate our way to a shared ethic. So let us turn to the ancients. Remember how the ancients used to debate what it meant to live a virtuous life. Classical philosophers identified the four virtues as prudence, justice, fortitude, and temperance. We should be doing more of that as a country right now, I think, talking about what it means to lead a virtuous life. Virtue, Snyder insists, is an essential part of freedom. Snyder then goes on to lay out 5 forms of freedom too, the context and the ways of being that lead to life-giving, life-affirming freedom. And here they are. Each one has its own chapter. I'm just giving you the title. 1 is sovereignty, the capacity to make autonomous choices. 2 is unpredictability, the power to adapt and not conform. 3 is mobility, the capacity to move through time and space following our values. 4 is factuality. There are facts, people, and we need to get a grip on them because that allows us to change the world. And number 5 is solidarity, the recognition that freedom is for everyone. Okay, I know it's a lot, but I hope you stick with me. Here's a little bit more. How will we know when, if we are experiencing freedom too? We will experience freedom too when we are resolute in our virtues, when we persist and adhere to our values, and have some power to achieve them. Snyder writes, without a vision of what should be, we cannot be clear about how what is can ever change. Okay, there's one more thing I have to lift up about Snyder's book. Freedom is not the same thing as safety. Freedom is not the same thing as safety. Think of Volodymyr Zelensky, the president of Ukraine. He did not flee the Russian invasion, although he surely must have been scared. He chose to stay and be free, knowing full well that he would not be safe, that his body, mind, and spirit were at risk. Well, Timothy Snyder tells a story of meeting Volodymyr Zelensky in person in 2022 at the start of the war. And here is what he writes. When I asked Zelensky why he had remained in Kyiv, he said that he could not have done otherwise. Explaining his choice, he began not from the specific predicament, dramatic though it was, and not even from himself. He spoke of his love for his parents and what he had learned from them. He had not chosen them, yet in his love for them, he was free. He compared that love to the decision to remain in the capital as the war began. Staying was not something he did alone. He was in the company of those who had taught him when he was younger and those who had elected him. He was in the company of others who were also taking risks. He understood the situation, he said, because of what it meant to represent others as an elected leader. A president, he said, was only the first grain of sand in a turning hourglass. Would that we had a leader like that. 4 years later, the war continues and Volodymyr Zelensky continues to stay. He is not safe, but he is free. My dear SAP UCCers, Holy Week has begun. The scriptures tell us what happened on that first Palm Sunday. It's up to us to ask and answer for ourselves why it happened that first Palm Sunday. Why did Jesus plan and then create the piece of political street theater that we still remember and reenact 2,000 years later? I think it's because Jesus entered Jerusalem to say no more to the way of empire. Jesus entered Jerusalem to say no more to the domination system. Jesus entered Jerusalem not just for freedom from, but freedom to. My freedom, your freedom, our collective freedom. Jesus came to set us free, to show us how to be free, to teach us an ethic of freedom for us to pass on to the next generation and the next and the next. So every Palm Sunday, Jesus asks us and looks us in the face, are you willing to confront the domination system? Are you willing to follow me on the path of death and resurrection? Are you gonna choose to envision the reign of God? And are you going to get on your ratty-looking donkey and participate in co-creating a better world? I don't mean to be yelling at you. My emotions are right there for all kinds of reasons. Friends, the way of Jesus, especially during Holy Week, asks us to be more than a passive bystander. Holy Week is not a time to nod our heads and say, yeah, I know what happens. The way of Jesus demands more than our intellectual assent, more than a set of beliefs. The way of Jesus should inform the way we live our lives. That's it. So the way of Jesus is the why we do whatever we do. It's how we show up and give and protest, sing and dare and refuse and refute, envision and weep, hope and love. The way of Jesus informs us when we say yes and when we say no. And the way of Jesus helps us to envision what might be for all God's creatures, not what is. And so, that's why the faith action at the Minnesota State Capitol and 16 other states this afternoon is so important. Thousands of Christians are going to show up and say no to the domination system of greed, hatred, and delusion. Thousands of Christians are going to say yes to the way of Jesus, that path of death and resurrection, because we share a common ethic. And thousands of Christians are going to embody freedom too, not just freedom from. Okay. I close with two quotes from Timothy Snyder's remarkable book. Here they are. First, whether we will be free will depend on us, not just on what we do, but on why we do it. And second, freedom is not a drama we watch. It is a play that we write on a stage that we build for an audience of everyone. Hosanna, 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 Hosanna.